like to introduce our speaker this evening, is Anastasia Zolotukhina. She's going to speak about methods of work with emotions of the past in relation to Baroque dance. So a big welcome to Anastasia, and she's all yours.
Hello, good evening. I'm delighted to be here. So first, I would like to thank Aliona and Lottie for letting me in here, for inviting me. And unfortunately, I don't know very well the audience, so I'm sorry, first of all, if I will be saying some things that everybody knows, then just let me know. And then second thing is that my English is far from perfect, but I hope you understand me and I understand you. This is it. Let me just briefly introduce myself and then we start. So my name is Anastasia Zolotukhina. I'm from Moscow and I am a PhD in Classical Philology. But also as a hobby, for many years, I'm dancing and reconstructing mostly Baroque dances and also Renaissance dances and all the things connected. So let us start with my presentation. Let's see. Just a moment. Okay, here it goes. As you can see, I've changed the title a bit to make it more modest, because of course I won't be talking about reconstructing real emotions, but mostly I will be proposing the method of working with the famous Doctrine of Affects in dancing, applying it to dance and theater of Baroque epoch. So first I would like to say just a few words about what we do, about our dancing studio. As you can see, it is called Entrée, and we are based in Moscow. And our main interest, among other things like social dancing, participating in balls and so on, are mostly stage dancing, performing, making Baroque performances, and also making research or doing research on Baroque aesthetics, rhetoric, art theory, and philosophy. So we try to, connect it all together. So as performers, we are not only interested in simple reconstruction of the structure of Baroque dancing, which I am sure you are all which you all know, yes? But we are also very concerned about the content of what we do, about the content of Baroque dance in general. So what I am now will be proposing are the methods of feeling the dance with content, yes, to bring it on stage, to feel the the pure form, to feel the structure. Because what every one of us actually does while reconstructing the Baroque dancing is, of course, reading the structure, the tracks, the steps, yes, reconstructing all the beautiful steps. And here we know almost everything, and we have the tools for doing that. But, for example, we are, as you know, more or less free in reconstructing the arms, the position of the arms, which is kind of free space for us, yes, for creativity. Of course, we have Rameau, who is explaining the Baroque arms and all that, But still, some free space here is given for us. And I will be also speaking about that today. So on this very simple outline chart, we can see, again, it's very well known for everybody, but still, what actually performing Baroque implies. Everybody does practice the part that I called practice 1, yes? Reading musical dancing sources and reconstructing them. Almost everybody also, of course, does the theoretical part, and we will be speaking a bit about theory today, which means reading philosophical and rhetorical treatises, treatises on musical theory, on poetics, on theory of art, and so on, and so on. And then when one brings Baroque music, Baroque dance, Baroque piece of theater on stage, of course, one needs also sources on performing, stage movement, on gesticulation, and visual art. I mean the images, the paintings of the epoch, yes? To study actually the aesthetics of movement. So this is the part, practice 2, that I'll be speaking about today. So when we are thinking about the main content of every Baroque piece of art, dance included, and reading all these treatises mentioned, yes, some of them I will mention further, we realize that the main content of a Baroque piece of art in the epoch, the 17th, 18th centuries, is the affect. What is an affect? As you know, it is a movement of the soul or of your mind, for example. And the Baroque era was especially concerned about affects, very popular theme, very popular topic. Why? Well, it's of course a complicated question. We are not going to answer it now, but to be brief, just to touch it on the surface, one can say that the doctrine of affects and the affects themselves are probably the most important part of rhetorical theory, as you know. And not only of the rhetorical theory, but of the part that is called the persuasion, the part that actually was elaborated by Aristotle, of course, as it is almost always the case. And as I said, that became extremely popular in the 17th century. Because, as we all know, the 17th century is often called the age of eloquence, as people were very interested in rhetoric. Not only rhetoric of the word, but also rhetoric of movement, rhetoric of your social behavior. Everything was under rhetorical rules. And not only that, but also if we compare the 17th century, the Baroque epoch, with other epochs, we can see that exactly what I mentioned before, the most important part of rhetorical art is persuasion for this period, because Baroque is very much about social behavior, about how you express yourself in society. Yes, and also about conversation with each other. Of course, without the persuasion, it's not possible. Well, one can talk, of course, much more about it, but I wouldn't like to be too theoretical. So here I just mentioned some of the most influential sources where one can read and form oneself about the doctrine of affects. These are rhetorical sources, rhetorical treatises, and I mentioned one of the beginning of the 17th century and the other that appeared close that appeared near the end of the century. Both of them very popular, re-edited many times. Then, of course, there are philosophical texts. Also, almost every philosopher, well, mostly we are, of course, speaking about French culture now, but not only. As you can see, there is Spinoza as well as Descartes. They also write special texts about affects, about les passions de l'âme. Then, of course, there are musicologists, also very interested in describing the affects, in naming the affects. I just name Athanasius Kircher and Johann Mattheson, but there are much more. Johann Mattheson is, of course, a bit later source of the 18th century. Actually, these are not the only fields where one can find the description of affects. But as I said, in the 17th century, almost every writer was mentioning the affects, was describing them from every possible point of view. For example, also from the medical point of view. We know that in the 1640s, the royal physician of Louis XIV also writes enormous treatise of 5 or 6 parts about the passions of soul. So just you find them just everywhere. And actually what we can find, what useful for us, we can find in these treatises, except theory, yes, except description of what affects actually are, how they are born, and so on. Well, first of all, we can find the lists of affects, so we can understand what actually we can use as performers, what we can express on stage. Well, as you can see, when we move through the century, the 17th century, we find that the number grows. Cossen, for example, who is one of the first rhetoricians of the 17th century, lists only 4 affects. And then you see that, for example, Mattheson, 1737, in his treatise, mentions much more. And for example, if we look into rhetorics of the late 18th century, French ones, we can find some over 30 different affects. So all this theory, of course, is becoming more and more subtle. Of course, we're not going to discuss every affect here mentioned, but some of them. And I will actually I will try to show you how we can express them, with what methods we can express them while dancing and performing. Okay. So now we know more or less what affects we can use. How do we express them? Well, here, as you know, a special part of rhetorical art exists that tells us how to express ourselves on public. And this part was called in Latin actio. That means actually action, pronunciation, yes, acting. In all rhetorical treatises, you will find that the main parts of actio, of action, of acting, are voice, using your voice, using your hands, the gestures, and using your body. Well, as dancers, we of course can't use our voice, but we can use our hands and our body. And speaking about using hands, we find out that in 17th century, people were very interested in gesticulation. Gesticulation in performing, not only in theater, but in all, so to speak, on all rhetorical occasions, like, for example, preaching. And here I list the main sources for the main treatises, yes, on gesticulation. Two of them are of the 17th century, as you see, and the last one is more probably well known, but it's early 19th century. So today I'm not going to stop on it in detail. The first source is, as you can see, an Italian one, and is of course it still belongs more or less to the 16th century, to the Cinquecento, because it's written in the encyclopedical manner, treating gestures of every part of your body, literally every part, and it has no pictures. So of course we can use it, but more in theory. Then another one that is of course very well known, and you know it of course, so I'm not going to stop on it too much, is the famous book of John Bulwer. That is important first because it's a considerable treatise, and we get to know many things about gesticulation there, also from the point of view of theory. And then, as you know very well, there are many pictures of gestures with the Latin names of affects, more or less, that the gestures express. And here they are. Well, again, of course, it's the images are really famous. But actually, the treatise was meant to be used more by the preachers than by the, for example, performance actors and so on. And moreover, we find similar treatises also in French, meant again for written by priests and meant for preaching in church. But then again, the idea is that, well, everybody went to church, and everybody could understand these gestures, and they could use them. And if we examine the visual art, the paintings, we will see that the gestures are more or less the same, also on paintings. Yeah. And for example, engravings of rhetoricians, of performers, and so on. So as performers, what we shall do, of course, we can't apply blindly the gestures of John Bulwer while performing, but we can compare them to paintings, to other sources, visual sources that we have, probably to other treatises, although there are not many, and try to develop the system that we can use while performing and dancing. Then again, probably one could ask oneself or me, why are we allowed to use gestures at all while dancing? Well, again, of course, we actually don't have any mentions of dancers actually gesticulating, but we are pretty well sure that there was the part of theatrical art, of theatrical performance. So I don't think it's a sin. I don't think that it's totally wrong to use the gesticulation to express the affect while dancing, because otherwise it's not actually really clear what are we going to express on stage while dancing, yeah, and how we're going to do that. Again, well, I'll just put this picture here to change it. Again, of course, there are other as you know, methods of expressing the affects in dancing. And for example, there are dictionaries in the 18th century who already find the lists, okay, not really dictionaries, but the lists of dances and corresponding affects. For example, in the same matter zone, we can find these lists, or in the as an addition to Weaver's libretto of his famous ballet Love of Mars and Venus of 1717. So these lists also already give us an idea of what affect corresponds to what dance. Well, for example, we all know that saraband is normally corresponds to the affect of languishing, languor, in love, of course, and so on. So the dancers themselves, more or less, already have to express, if danced properly, in proper rhythm, yes, with proper attitude, the effects. But if we want to go further and underline some parts of the dance, I'm going to show you our attempt to do it. We can also add the gesticulation a bit. Yes, a bit. Here are just some examples of correspondence between Bulwer's gestures and the paintings of the 17th and 18th centuries. Here, the gesture of admiration. Yeah, well, the problem with Bulwer, as you know, is that we don't really understand what the position actually is. We only see the hands, but not the whole body. Yes, so sometimes it's not really clear what he means. It's the same. We can see the admiration here and there. Other two affects. Well, this is almost admiration, but not exactly. This is ecstasy or delight. Here it is important that the right hand is lifted. Yes, so the two hands are not parallel. It's not possible for a human being to be parallel. This is the feature of God, the divine feature, but this is another discourse. Here, the gesture of denial. Bulwer also has it, but not in a very clear manner. But if we compare, we can understand how to do it. And these are examples of our performances, how we use the gestures in performances. Yes, I forgot to mention that the thing that we are actually doing mostly is staging Baroque pieces of theater, but dancing, using the dance. So we're writing, or we're using the existing Baroque librettos, poems or something, texts, poetic texts, or we're composing our own librettos in the Baroque style, in Russian, unfortunately. We use, as it was in the epoch, the ancient Greek mythology as the basis, or sometimes something else like alchemy, for example, or something else popular in the 17th century. Mostly the mythological scenes. Here again, it's another gesture that we can find elsewhere in treatises, in the paintings. You are very well, I know I think that you've seen it many times. The hands on one's heart means acceptance, or sometimes means I understand you. Sometimes it just means me. Yes. And here, for example, the gesture of triumph in Bulwer, and here our Jupiter is showing the gesture of triumph as well. Then one of the last things about gestures is that Bulwer actually distinguishes three kinds of gesticulations, of gestures. And these are not only expressive, these are expressive because they express something, yes, will affect your emotion. But also the emphatic gestures, when we want to draw attention on the important part of our dance, for example, or of our speech or anything. For example, this one, very well-known gesture of attention. And also the mimetic gestures, but they are mostly used in low style as comedy and pantomime. So rather special. Okay, and now I will show you our little attempt. It's not final, and I'm sorry that I can't show you the real thing because of this all this lockdown situation, we actually didn't have time to finish it. But I'll show you how we think is possible to use the rhetoric in the dance structure. And on purpose, we've chosen a very well-known dance, the Aimable Vainqueur, which probably was so popular because of its very clear rhetorical structure. Well, tonight, I mean, we are only talking about mostly gesticulation and affects, but actually there are much more rhetorical tools that can be found in dances and can help the interpreters to analyze the structure of dance. I'll just mention them, not to go into detail. These are the rhetorical structure, which is in many cases almost the same as in classical rhetorical speech, like with introduction, the development, and so on, according to the classical ancient rhetorical rules. Actually there is a main affect that the performer has to understand while reading the track, yes, the notation. While reading the notation, of course, it's useful to know the libretto from which the dance is taken, as in this case we know. Yeah? But even without it, if it's possible, when analyzing music, for example, because the rhetorical rules of Baroque music are very well known, written everywhere, many texts on it, yeah? Many secondary literature, much secondary literature, I'm sorry. And apart from rhetorical tools such as, for example, gesticulation, we also can use the tools of musical rhetoric, Baroque rhetoric, which is a thing apart, like, for example, ornamentation and so on. But today I'm not talking about it. So I'll try to show you our little video where we tried not only to underline some important spots of dance as we understand it, but also to express the main affect, which is not only love in general, but also languor, especially in the saraband parts of the dance. And in general, the story will be about disharmonious and then harmonious love. I'll stop this demonstration and start another one here. It's really not final, and you see that we are not. Can you see it? I hope so. Can you just somehow show me that everything is all right and you can see the video? Okay, thank you. I'll probably just stop sometimes to draw your attention to one gesture or another. And maybe then if you have questions, I will comment. But again, the video is not very good, unfortunately, but we didn't have the chance because of the situation to make another one. Well, here we use the figure of invocation to the, for example, god of love, just for example, but it's not necessary, of course. What you probably saw is that when we repeat the same gesture or the same movement in dance, which is usually the case, we don't repeat it, just the way it was. So we change something. For example, we stress more the gesture, or I don't know, we lift hands more, which also is the case in Baroque music, as you know. Well, here we try to show the doubt, because first we made the gesture of the heart. Yes, I'm there to you, but then the doubt. Here the gesture of denial, because it's a bit too early to, to unite. A bit too early for a real love union, because dance continues. Okay, so this is it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. That's really interesting. Thank you. I'm not a Baroque dancer, and I was fascinated at the appearance of the gestures in the art of the period, and I thought that was really interesting. So it's this is a request for anyone who's who has a question to pose of Anastasia. This is your big chance. We realise, I'm not sure Anastasia realised that the sound didn't work on the video, but the gestures and the movement worked really nicely. So it wasn't quite the end of the world. So any questions that people have? I've got a question for you while they're thinking about it. And I was interested in the combination of the effects when you started off talking about rhetoric, philosophy, and musicology. And I was interested, I'd be interested to hear how you get your dancers to appreciate and understand the musical side of the dance before they get to the gesture.
Oh, yes, thank you for your question very much, although I can't see you, unfortunately.
No, that's okay. I'll start my video. There we go. I am ready.
Yes, oh, thank you very much. That's better. Yes, well, we usually start with music because music is, you know, the first stage of working on dance. And well, I have to say that not everybody of our dancers is, you know, had musical training before. So we have to explain these things to others. First of all, the composition. No, actually, first of all, the affect of the music. Then the composition of the music, and then as we listen, we try to find the moments of music that are underlined, for example, with the ornaments. And then we actually try to, you know, transfer it all to dancing. So we usually first, even before looking at the notation, at the dance notation, we listen to the music, because otherwise it doesn't work very well.
Yes,
then,
no.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, it strikes me as a very integrated.
Yeah, because otherwise we are actually very far away from the epoch. So yeah, we need many additional tools to understand it, not just dancing. Well, of course, if we want to really reconstruct the theater dance, in the social dancing, the situation is a bit easier, right? Not so complicated. Thank you for your interest.
No, I have some questions from other people. They've thought of some questions while I've posed you that, so thank you very much. I have a comment from a couple of comments. Much appreciation. Catherine Torki says that your analysis reminded her of the work of Ricky Barros, who teaches in this country. And Talitha Mackenzie said that, wondered if she said that there's the gesture for denial and rejection. She thought was always to the left, but one of your photos had the partner gesturing to the right. And she wondered if there's a source that gives that a possibility.
Yes, thank you for a good question. First of all, I would like to thank Catherine for the link. I will look at it. Thank you very much. And about the denial, very good point. It has to be on the left. Yes, I think it probably was a mistake. It really has to be on the left. I didn't really notice that it was on the right on the photo. I don't remember the exact moment that we took the photo. It was during the performance, so probably the hero, the character, just had to do it like that from the point of view of I don't know, the view from stage or something like that, you know, the composition of actors on stage and so on. But normally the right normally has to be on the left, of course. Yes, sure. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Alina asks how you came across the affects theory and came up with the idea to use it as part of the dance.
Well, as I tried to briefly mention it in the beginning of my lecture, we were just thinking how to really feel the dance with meaning. And so we started to investigate through the art treatises of the epoch and actually realized that they are all somehow talking about the doctrine of affects, the theory of affects. So we just have to use it. If musicians did, if I don't know, the dramaturgists and actors did, why dancers didn't? So yeah, that's why.
And it also strikes me that if you're many of the venues that you're dancing at are theatrical ones, then it lends itself to that gesture rather than just being about movement, choreography, or about steps.
Yes, of course, and then it's just the next stage of Baroque dancing, because the notation, the choreography is already more or less done. we already know it more or less. So now there are other questions to investigate, because we can't stop like that, Yeah.
Okay, Catherine also asks, do you address the movement of the soul in your work?
Well, the affect is the movement of the soul, actually. For example, well, not to mention ancient sources, the Saint Descartes writes much about it. And also John Bulwer, the gesticulation master, he writes about how actually every affect grows, is born first in the soul, and how it grows, physiologically speaking. For example, I don't know, when our soul is glad, then everything physiologically is opening up. And it brings all the gestures, all the movements to that side, to the opening movement. Yes? So this is why when we want to express happiness or joy, we just have to do something like that. And so on. He gives many examples. Yes, so first the movements of the soul, then the movements of the body.
Yes, yes. Okay, time for one more question, if anyone else has another question. While I think about that, Catherine comments that she thought that the Jesuit dance philosophers talk about using gesture and effect. Of course, Noverre, who was the student of Stahl.
Yes, sure, but Noverre comes a bit later. I absolutely agree. We tried to investigate what was a bit before, and of course the Jesuits are the masters, not only the dance philosophers, but the rhetoricians and the philosophers in general, and mostly Jesuits that are talking about it. Thank you very much. It's absolutely like that. Yes.
Okay, a final comment from Talitha. She said you might want to check out the work of Margit Legler, I got that pronounced right, who talks about how the stage direction is developed to ensure that each performer is in the correct position on stage so that the gestures will be correct in relation to each other, and how complicated that can all be.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually, I think it's based, I will absolutely check it out. I think it's based on this treatise called Il Corago, which is one of the well-known Baroque treatises on staging. But yes, absolutely. We are also trying to research on that subject too, on the positions, right side of the stage, left side of the stage, and all that. It has its own meaning. Thank you for your comment.
Okay, so many thanks to Anastasia for a fascinating talk this evening. Next week we have a break when we allow ourselves to go off and hopefully find a bit of the summer sunshine, which certainly in England at the moment is missing. And then we'll be back 2 weeks tonight on Wednesday the 29th at the now regular time of 7 o'clock, when Entrée will be presenting a talk on a professional woman of the Regency era, the career of Mrs. Elliston. Now, before I let you depart, Lottie, whose idea this was to have these talks, and a great idea, which we've been very happy to follow up, is about to embark on a new career, and so she hasn't sadly got the time to devote to this any longer. So there will be a continued presence of me as the host, and Anne Smithies and I will be looking after the administration of this. It does mean there'll be a slight change. Up till now, once you've registered, you're in for all of them. We're going to move to a register for each event system, which will be run by Eventbrite. This is exactly the same as for many other talks and presentations, webinars that you log on to. They'll still be free. We'll send you the link. You just have to register your interest. The lectures will be continuing, and you've seen the list of speakers through into August. We're still looking for more speakers, so if you're interested or know anyone who might be interested, please send them in our direction. When we get to the end of August, we're hoping that we'll have enough to carry on. Anne and I are currently reflecting on whether we continue them weekly or make them slightly less frequent as we go on into September and into the autumn. But we are completely dedicated to their continuation. It's a great way of spreading the word about historical dance. If I can give one little plug before we leave, I know a number of you are members of the Historical Dance Society. If you're not, we welcome members from abroad as much as in the United Kingdom. You can join on our website. It doesn't cost very much, and it keeps you in the community of this senior dance, historical dance organisation in the UK. But without further ado, I'd like to say thank you very much to Anastasia again. Look out for the talk on YouTube if you want to catch it again, or any of the others, and come back in 2 weeks' time, listen to Anne Day. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.